Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BetSperts.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. Still on the road, Andy. I was home for one day and one day only, and we recorded a deep dive. It was glorious.
I was going to say your baritone wasn't quite as strong during that.
Welcome to The Deep Dive. I have to exaggerate.
Well, this is, we kind of dogged in this division a little, but there's some fun stuff to talk about today, maybe more in the second half of this. But no, we'll, because you're on the road, we'll forego with all the pleasantries and small
fanfare.
The fanfare,
all the tomfoolery.
We will forego the ado without further ado. No more ado. We'll just hopefully not flying over Russian airspace at James Cole. I don't think he's an enemy of the Putin. So I think you could fly. I wouldn't fly in Russia, but I think you maybe could safely. But yeah, I just said without further ado, and we went right into the ado again. Let me check that for you, Dan, too. Everyone was so worried about Drew's microphone, and I ended up on the microphone myself. There we go. That should be better as well. It's funny. We did.
Oh, that sounds great.
We were so worried about your back.
All right. Well, one of us has sterling audio. The other of us is fighting the fight of the road. But that's the way it goes this time of year, Andy. Tennessee Titans 2023. I got some takes. This time last year, we took a bold stand that the Titans were secretly tanking. They went on to reel off a very impressive start to the season. They were covering machines through the first half. Ryan Tannehill gets hurt, and it all went tits up. The firing of the general manager for presumably shipping A.J. Brown out of town, it was kind of incongruous with what I thought was generally a good self-evaluation of where they were in their arc. But the Titans can't help themselves. They're in it to win. And for those reasons, this franchise is now squarely in the hands of Mike Vrabel, who, has shown a Tomlin-like knack to snatch victories from the jaws of defeat and create 500 records year in, year out, even if that comes at the expense of realistically contending for the AFC.
I made that same comp in my head earlier today when I was reading up a little on Vrabel. It was just like, you're describing Tomlin. Like, this is just, it's a good coach who gets the most out of some bad pieces. And yeah, 2022, they finished 7-10, missed the playoffs after starting 7-3. Like you said, they fired your GM mid-season. Don't think the timing wasn't very pertinent to what was happening. They just lost to A.J. Brown and the Eagles, and obviously that wasn't the greatest look for the guy who pulled that off. So they just went with an interim GM. We'll talk about the new GM when we get to next year, but it was an injury marred season, and I do feel for them because they were doing some things right. But when you lose your starting quarterback, you miss 5 games. You lose Taylor Lewan, who missed a shitload of games. Harold Landry, who missed a ton of games. I think all of them. Landry was preseason. That was like a before the season injury. So
right on the eve of the season.
Yeah, missing him. Robert Woods was not good. He might as well have been injured. Treylon Burks was okay early, but he got a concussion, missed some time. Malik Willis turned out to not be the answer. Obviously, we saw that. Yeah, to any question, we saw that. That with the Ryan Tannehill contract situation where he's at. Obviously, we saw that in this year's draft. They took another quarterback. Honestly, Dobbs played himself into another job. He was kind of decent late in some spots. Henry still looked good enough, but the O-line started sliding and it slid to where it is now. And I mean, I pulled this from somewhere. Yeah, the ball carriers were getting hit early and often. Like the yards before contact was really poor. The Titans quarterbacks were pressured over 25% of their dropbacks. It was a second most in the entire NFL. That was kind of a harbinger of where we're at now because this is a really bad offensive line. But yeah, again, it was just there was a ton of injuries. It was tough. They did fire the OC after the season. Obviously, being 28th in points scored didn't help his case, but also getting a DUI mid-season.
DUI, yeah, that was the straw that broke back there.
Getting super fucked up on the team plane and driving home wasn't great. The defense. So this was, and I want your opinion on this. The defense had a really good run stop grade.
Yes,
but the more I dug into this, nobody ran on them because obviously how many pass rushers have I listed that have been injured? Autry was injured.
Yep.
So once you do that and then you lost Christian Fulton, it became, we could just throw on this team. That seems easy enough. So their run grade was good, but also nobody got run on less and passed on more than the Tennessee Titans defense. Like it was just hey, take what they'll give you, and they're really giving it away in the passing game, especially over the top stuff. So a little bit of a grain of salt was saying this was like a good run defense. It was just by relative to the pass defense, and then teams just kind of stopped running on them in general. My highlight of last year was they had a pretty good punter. Turned out. Yeah, he was very good for a young punter.
Mike Vrabel squeezes those edges out of the special teams, buddy. You better believe it. Every single man on the 53 is contributing in some way. It was a wild, weird season. Despite the positive start in terms of win-loss, I still felt like, and I say positive start, they had an ugly loss as a 5-point favorite week 1. On the New York Giants tone-setting 2-point conversion attempt, which was pretty stupid from an analytic standpoint, but it worked out, and it won Dable over the locker room, and ultimately they needed that win to get into the playoffs. So congratulations, Giants. But that was you lost as 5-point favorites at home. You go into week 2 Monday Night Football game against the Buffalo Bills, a team you had performed well against in years past. You're 10-point dogs, and you didn't even sniff them. It was a 41-7 ass kicking. And through 2 weeks, through 2 missed covers, we're starting to do a little victory lapping. Hey, this is a little secret tank job. They do kind of understand. Now,
the secret tank job was the best conspiracy theory from last year.
They went on and ripped off 5 straight wins, 8 straight covers. One of 2 teams that covered 8 straight times in 2022, the other being the aforementioned Cincinnati Bengals, who ended the Titans covering streak. During that streak, they were favorites a couple times. The schedule was very easy. They did cover 12.5 against the Chiefs. But like the market had meaningfully downgraded this team after seeing Buffalo just run up and down all over, run amok on them. And it was exactly the way you laid it out. This team was a pass funnel. They were exceptional at stopping the run, and they were very poor at stopping the pass. And so game planning, a game-specific game plan for how to attack this defense was very straightforward, and they never really adjusted to it. In the games that they won, they typically did by holding teams into the teams into the tens and teens. They gave up 10 or 17 points. My guess is that's just because teams had a difficult time putting away the wins on the ground, the teams had a difficult time getting going, I guess, on the ground. I really don't know what happened there. But it was also up against a bunch of really questionable quarterbacks. They got to face Matt Ryan twice in that stretch. They got to face Carson Wentz in that stretch. They got to face Davis Mills in that stretch. They got to face Russell Wilson in that stretch. So I think a lot of sort of the early season signal that the Titans really were going to be in the playoff picture. Yeah, this is the team that's coming off of a 1 seed in the very, very talented AFC. Like people definitely thought, they could potentially repeat that level of success. And they did well going up against weak quarterbacks. But then the quarterback challenges, the tables turned, Andy. In the stretch between going against Burrow, Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Herbert. That's a tough 4-game stretch, and they went from conceding 10 to 17 points to conceding 20, 35, 36, 17. Those still aren't huge numbers, but it was enough to knock them out of the playoff mix. Ultimately, the loss to the Houston Texans in Week 15 was kind of a backbreaker. They were 3-point favorites in that game. Never. And then the final week of the season, their playoff hopes were still alive, Andy. If they win in primetime against the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're in. And they almost did.
Yeah, they were up by 10.
They were, yes.
Game.
They were. Ultimately, they covered, but they did not win. And Jacksonville goes dancing. Tennessee goes home. And I don't love the team building concepts that they went through this offseason. They had some pretty obvious areas that they needed to address. They didn't really. I think they needed to go into tank mode to really kind of rebuild, but they didn't. So this team is kind of going to be squarely in purgatory for the foreseeable future, as far as I can tell you. And I made up, last year's record was not a success. Ultimately, trading away AJ Brown was a franchise-altering decision that was quite poor. If you weren't going to then rebuild, right?
Yeah, it really. I mean, it was, and there was some, youth. There was some Robert Woods, and there was some injury, but it was that bad of a receiving room that they could really never get anything going. Henry was, a step older. I mean, since 2019, he's had like 1,200 carries. And granted, a bunch of those end up in the end zone or out of bounds. But how much money would it take for you to be tackled? All right, I'm going to have a Pro Bowl linebacker tackle you, Drew. You can put pads on. I would have to. It would be 5 figures for somebody to let them do that to me. I think. Essentially, he's let that happen 1,000 times over 3 years. That's so much wear. We've said this every year for 3 years, but eventually that has to wear on a guy. I think we're starting to see some of that. And yes, the Chiefs game, every year we get these weird games, but yeah, I had to go back and look because I remembered him throwing a bunch and I didn't remember this. If I told you Patrick Mahomes was 43 for 68 with 446 yards, how many points do you think Kansas City would have scored in regulation in a game like that?
35?
Yeah,
that sounds like
that
a 30.
That was a 17-all game going into overtime that the Chiefs just scraped by. They could not run the ball. They could not convert third downs. Neither team could convert third downs. Tennessee was 1 for 11 on third down and somehow took them to overtime in that game. Henry was good in that game. They didn't turn the ball over and they were perfect in the red zone. That's what it took. But yeah, there was a few weird results, and obviously the end of the season stuff was they were injured. They had to go to Willis. Willis didn't work. They ended up going to Dobbs. It just there were so many things going against them late in the season, and the team that we're going to get to here in a second, the Jaguars, were kind of doing the opposite. While they were 7-3, the Jags were 3-7. Obviously, there was some. I don't know if you go look at that 3-7 record too. They had some games they could have, should have, would have won. It was a better team than we thought, and I don't want to talk too much about the Jags because we're going to do that eventually. I have some thoughts on what turned that season around, but yeah, this was, for all intents and purposes, a very disappointing season considering where they were the year before. And yeah, you fired the coordinator, you fired a couple other coaches, the O-line coach, you fired the secondary coach, you hired a GM that sent me down a weird rabbit hole. I didn't know a ton about Ran Carthon. His dad was a fullback in the league. I knew he came from the Niners. I went and dug into him a little, and the Wikipedia thing where it goes way back, and a name popped out. It said Minnesota Moorhead, and the year was kind of mid 2000. I had to look at it, and eventually I ended up on Eric Eager's LinkedIn page to try to match it up because that's where he played college football. I'm like, I wonder if this was if they didn't cross paths. There was a couple years apart. So, but Sumer Sports tie-in anyway. Carthon was hired by the Falcons by Thomas Dimitroff in his first year as GM. That's where he got a start. Ended up getting hired at a bigger role in the Niners organization. Moved up there pretty quickly. It looked like so. maybe a plus move for them. I never know with GMs. I think hiring somebody from the Niners organization is probably a plus.
Yeah,
just
not the only parallel, by the way, with the Falcons. The Falcons feel very much like this year's Titans, just in terms of how they're going to approach a game. Yeah. The Art Smith is obviously trying to recreate the success that he had with Tennessee. Tennessee was an under machine last year. They were 11-6 to the under. And honestly, the market adjusted their totals down pretty quickly. By week 4, we were looking at 43s. By week 6, we were looking at hovering around 40s. We've closed the season with like 35, 39. Didn't matter. This team was just chugging under. And that's kind of the way I read the Falcons this year. So, yeah, a lot of similarities. I guess they've never really been able to reproduce the offense they had with Art Smith. They've been trying.
They have been, and I kind of have bad news on my take on what they go from there. So before we get into the new offense, I talked Carthen a little. He did kind of had his work cut out for him because there were some big contracts. Like Dupree was making a ton of money. Lewan was making a lot of money. They're kind of up against it, and they weren't in a good spot to be up. It's not like, hey, we just won a Super Bowl, but we got to make some cuts. Okay, we just had a disastrous second half of the season, and we got to make some cuts. So he has his work cut out for him. And obviously the offensive line was a big problem, big ask. They did make some moves. Obviously, Skoronski with the first round pick. They signed a tackle from the Eagles, but they've had some attrition, some injuries, and some suspensions. So it's still not something that's fixed. And obviously, the other big issue is the wide receiver room, which looked like it wasn't going to get fixed at all. And then they obviously ended up going and getting a wide receiver who will, depending how you feel about him, it doesn't matter if you think like his best years are behind him. He is a massive upgrade from what they had. So if things come together a little and Derrick Henry doesn't, die on the field from overuse, there's some pieces here because Tannehill's, a very serviceable quarterback. This isn't a pushover team despite where they're at in the rebuild. It's just kind of effing fragile. We saw Tannehill miss time, and that wasn't good. We got Willis still on the roster. We got what's Mayonnaise guy's name? Will Levis. He's injured in preseason. He missed some time. He missed a game. He might not play this Friday in the third preseason game. Tannehill doesn't take preseason snaps. Maybe might have to. Otherwise, we're going to look at 100% Malik Willis game in week 3 here for the Titans. But it's kind of a goofy season because the schedule isn't bad. The team isn't horrible on paper, but I guess it is one of those fragile teams where you better hope you hit on Hopkins. Like that has to work. Your quarterback has to stay healthy, and you can't have any more attrition at the wide receiver or at the offensive line. It feels like one of those where the wheels could fall off real quickly again. I guess at least you're in the AFC South. So I don't know. What did you think of the offseason moves?
I had a controversial take that betting pod ratings pushed back on and called me an idiot for. And I want your take on it, unless you run betting pod ratings, and it was you who was upset about my take.
I'm glad I have him muted, but I did. Somebody let me know. I finally got tagged as
good.
One he didn't have time to listen to or couldn't make it through.
Yeah, sure.
I guess it could be a she.
It could be.
I was a little worried that people were going to think it was me because that turd.
You were conspicuously, yeah. You were conspicuously.
I was conspicuously absent, and he mentioned the Trenhale podcast.
Yes. Which you would do.
I've mentioned at least 5 times on here. That's my favorite podcast of all time.
Yeah. No, the take was when Hopkins got signed, that solidified my sincere belief that the Jaguars are going to win this division.
Okay.
And the reason is that eliminates any kind of realistic chance that the Titans just suck enough to go into tank mode and give the Colts or the Texans some extra wins, right? Like Hopkins on the Titans, to me, keeps Indy and Tennessee pretty squarely in 3 and 4. No Hopkins, and all of a sudden I can see a world where Tennessee is the 4th best team pretty clearly, right? Yeah. And so, to me, it was just it was a sign that the organization is going to try no matter what till the end this year. They're going to if Tannehill is healthy, they're trotting him out there. They're not building for the future. They're trying to win games this year, even if it's only 6 or 7, right? Including those games against the Texans and the Colts. And I thought the way that the schedule was laid out, there was a realistic chance if you gave the Texans or the Colts a couple extra wins early in the season, then all of a sudden they're a threat to take the crown from the Jags. And so I was like, oh, good. So we kind of have some information. Titans aren't going to quit. They're going to try. And, Hopkins keeps, to me at least, moves the skill position group.
He's a chain mover.
He's a chain mover.
That's what they lacked a lot. There was a lot of problems just getting third downs, getting the ball moving.
He's a chain mover, and he absolutely raises the skill position group from bottom 5 to middle of the pack. And that overall moves the offense into a range where I think this is now 500-ish team. And that's perfectly fine. They're going to beat the dregs of the league largely on the strength of their defense, and they are going to have relatively little chance against the good teams because they're not going to be able to score more than 20. And basically, like, this is a pretty easy read team to me now, which is you're going up against any kind of pass rush with a pulse, you fucked. You're going up against any type of team that has an elite passer, you're fucked. If you're going up against a team that's a little weak or a little imbalanced or has, a specific, kind of weakness, then you're going to win. And I think that gets them into the 6-11, 7-10 range pretty comfortably. But I don't think that threatens the Jaguars because they just don't match up with Jacksonville very well, I don't think.
No, and yeah, I hate making strong assumptions about a group we haven't seen play because essentially this is an entirely brand new offensive line. Like it's 4 guys who weren't here last year, didn't play, and then your center's kind of new. He didn't play center last year. He was a guard. So it's hard to just say like, hey, these 5 people that really haven't played together, like they're gonna suck really badly. But if you look at the grades and where they came from and how they played in other cities, I guess I'm okay with it. I guess it's just I hate doing just broad strokes on a big unknown like this, but it's really hard to make any sort of bull case for this offensive line. The offensive line that struggled last year is probably just going to be 4 different guys, and then one guy who moved to center. It's going to struggle in the same kind of relationship they had last year with the high pressure rates, the poor run blocking rates. Like Derrick Henry got hit early and often. It's lucky he is the tractor Cedo because he's able to make, yards after contact, which again, to my point, he gets hit so many times a year. It's crazy that he still keeps on trucking. And I guess the most troubling thing I saw from this whole thing was the Tim Kelly offensive coordinator part, where he's the guy I mentioned. Like he came from the Texans, and he did do some play calling, some play scheming there in 2021. And God, where is it? It was from Football Outsiders, basically saying like, hey, Todd Downing ran the ball no matter what. Didn't matter how ineffective it was. He was going to run, and he was going to run a lot on first down. And it was kind of the same thing with Kelly in 2021 with the Texans. Like, except when they had an empty package, which makes it hard to run the ball, empty backfield, he ran the ball on first down like more than anyone in the league that year. No. So it's probably just more of the same, where it's ineffective play calling So even if you bring in Hopkins, it's a boost. But unless there's some magic beans we just don't know about with this offensive line, or Tim Kelly suddenly evolved as a play caller, like I struggle to see this being a good offense. And on the other side of the ball, they did make some changes, and they have some players. There's some decent players, but they probably just don't have enough of it on any of the levels for it to be a decent defense. So. Yeah, it's one of those where, if they match up with a team that doesn't have a particularly good pass rush, maybe can't stop some of the run schemes they put together, they're gonna score 20 points, and if they can keep the other team to 17, they're gonna win those same ugly 30, 35 to 40 point games that they won last year. So it does feel just terribly similar, and the upside from last year would be, if Tannehill plays the whole season, it's going to be a better team than trotting Willis out or trotting Dobbs out, especially with, the lack of skill position players they had. So,
yeah, I'm only, for health reasons, I'm only projecting Tannehill to start 14 weeks. I think missing 3 games is realistic. If you combine that with the offensive line and the risk of specifically the hits he's going to take, maybe that's an end conservative assumption that he's going to make 14 games, but 14 of Tannehill and 3 of the backups puts your quarterback situation in sort of the 20s for me. Your offensive line is 32nd with a bullet. I don't think there's really an argument of who's the worst offensive line in football. On paper, it is the Tennessee Titans. The reinforcements are nothing to write home about either. It's a balanced weakness. It's not like there's 1 or 2 weak links. Like, they're all weak links, pretty much. I guess the one guy that I have as above replacement level is Aaron Brewster, but he's right at the mid line. Like, he's right at replacement level line. He
is changing positions. Like, he was a guard last year, and he's going to be called to start at center this year. So, and Petit Freer with the suspension. It's gonna be a whole thing. It's gonna be a struggle. I think if we are looking for a highlight of this team, there's a decent chance they have a good defensive line, and then Fulton is very serviceable. I don't know about the Sean Murphy Bunting thing. That was the guy. He was kind of just the guy who was right place, right time for some interceptions for Tampa, but he struggled at times.
He was the weak link in that secondary, by my numbers.
So that the pass rush, the defensive front in general looks good on paper, but if the secondary struggles, they're obviously going to feel some of the ramifications of that. Who is it? Simmons, Landry. One of these.
Jeffrey Simmons is a Jeffrey Simmons is a true blue chip defensive tackle.
Yeah,
and he's perfectly made for today's NFL. He is the straw that stirs the drink there. I think the rest of the guys on that line, Autry, Tart, and Landry, are sick. They're sick. This is a very, very, very good front seven. Overall, it's a top 10 defense by my numbers. I have them 9th. I have their front seven high. I have their pass rush right now rated 4th in the NFL, largely on the back of Simmons. The DBs are weak. The linebackers are weak. The linebackers especially are weak. This team is still a pass funnel. They're a tight end funnel. They're a pass funnel. And I think it's going to be pretty straightforward for teams to game plan against them, which makes things, as you said, very fragile. The guys who are gone, but Dupree never lived up to his contract. David Long is a good player that you let walk out the door for some reason. And then there was a laundry list of guys that are no longer here, including Austin Hooper and Robert Woods and Mario.
Your mic is starting to really suck, Drew. Like, it's cracking and speeding up.
Oh,
and yet, I mean, some of the guys that did walk out the door, some of it was just you couldn't afford them anymore, and you had to find some guys that cost half as much. So I don't know, how's your phone doing? Do you want to?
None of them were very good, though. Yeah, none of them were very good, and the guys you brought in aren't very good. So your off-season grades for me are you get a D. you elected not to rebuild in sincerity. We know you were trying to trade up for the third pick to take CJ Stroud. I don't know if I loved that move necessarily. And I don't know that I love a guy like Mike Vrabel deciding, hey, Ohio State guy, I like him. It's my kind of guy. Let's go up and get him.
Yeah.
That's a bad sign. Mike Vrabel kind of fingerprints on some of the decision-making as far as kind of how you populate this roster is a bad sign. So long-term kind of seller of the Titans in terms of franchise vision, even though Vrabel is a good coach and gets the best out of these players. Sorry about the audio,
Yeah,
guys.
no, that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing for me is like they were forced to part with some players due to expenses and contracts. The guys they replaced them with, at best, below where they're at. They didn't wow me with the hire at offensive coordinator. So you've got, I don't know what like Tannehill's motivation is. Like he wants a contract somewhere next year. He's not that old. Like the, quarterback, like, so probably highly motivated, but at the same time, if he starts getting dinged up and he's worried about a long-term injury or something, like if I'm him, I'm sitting. I'm like,
shutting himself down.
Yeah, this is not blood, sweat. I'm not giving you blood, sweat, and tears for this one. So yeah, let's pull up the schedule because I did allude to that a little earlier. It's not horrible. And if you look to, they do have one of their home games is technically lost because that Baltimore game is a London game. And they're dogs in a lot of these, but a lot of these early games, they're not big dogs. Obviously, home at Cincinnati is not easy. At Cleveland, very tough. The Chargers game is, I guess, at least it's at home and it's early in what we're going to see from the new Kellen Moore offense. Kind of the same thing with New Orleans. You're getting it early while they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with the new offense down there. Not that I trust that coaching staff at all. And God, this was another nice nugget from Clev TA in his preview. The travel outside of London, granted, they will go to London, England, which is a long ways away, and they take the bye after it at least. But outside of that, the furthest west they will go all year is Houston. No Mountain Time games, no West Coast games. Their overall travel is very, very light. And you see that, even when they have the travel disadvantages, they're the light orange. They have a nice significant travel advantage. I'm guessing that's a Seattle back-to-back road. They get a team that they should probably be competitive with, if not, beat, because it's a home game in Atlanta off the bye. There's some decent spots for them here. It's just like you said, it's hard to, even if, I don't know, what's the, I hate to say even middle of the pack, a realistic ceiling for this offensive line is probably like 20.
No,
stretching it. Well, Drew. There's too many unknowns. I'm absolutely willing.
Oh God. Okay.
There's too many unknowns, and I'm absolutely willing to stretch it out there. Like, obviously, 90% of the time, this offensive line is 27 to 32. Like it's bottom, least it's bottom least. 95% of the time. But there's least, yeah. Let's just say everything comes up Tennessee. Everything comes up Oilers here. The good luck that's going to come with pulling those jerseys out. Like if their offense, God, even 20. All right, let's say 23rd.
I'll give them a ceiling of 25. When the dust settles, they got some health, they got some continuity. The balance of the season, we're willing to say this is the 25th best O-line. That's the ceiling for me.
Let's say the offensive line overperforms somehow. Derrick Henry's healthy, Nuke works, Tanny's healthy. Like everything we said, all the positive stuff turns out. It's still very, very difficult to, find a way where this is like, hey, they won 9-10 games and are in the playoffs.
Yeah, and part of the reason is there's a combination of problems, not just that you have an especially poor O-line, but this schedule of pass rushes is phenomenally tough. This is a nasty, nasty slate of pass rushes. You got to go week 2 against Bosa and Mac. Week 3, you get Clowney and company.
Garrett.
I mean, you got a Garrett and company. Week 4, Cincinnati is consistently outstanding at generating pressure. Baltimore, I think you can count on being decent-ish by the time we get to week 6. Atlanta just invested a ton in their pass rush. Pittsburgh has one of the best in the league.
Pittsburgh has a player.
Welcome to town, Vita Vea and Shaq Barrett. Welcome to town, Brian Burns and Carolina Panthers. Welcome to town, Jalen Phillips in Miami. Like, this is literally going to be the team that you circle if you are trying to make your defense player of the year case and your name's not Micah Parsons. Like, you are thinking Tennessee's on my schedule, need 5 that day. And there's a lot of good players.
I know. And all the bowl cases I made for this offense, whereas like Tannehill is not bad. Hopkins is legitimately good. You still have a very, very viable running back. It's kind of like what we said when we talked to Miami. You know, it's, hey, Tyreek Hill might be the best receiver in the world, but if you're trotting Skylar out there, you might as well just be starting anybody else. Doesn't matter. Like, it completely nullifies something. So if this offensive line is truly and, you know, completely that bad, and it's just 32 out of 32 again, high pressure rates, getting people hit in the backfield, lots of sacks, lots of tackles for losses, lots of long third downs, it doesn't matter if you went and got Hopkins. It's just, it kind of just nullifies the moves you made and anything you did to try to improve it. And then on top of that, again, if you're going to run with an offensive coordinator who's known to run more than he should on first down, and you have a bad offensive line and your play sequencing sucks and you're looking at a lot of third and longs behind a bad offensive line with TJ Watt looking at you across the line, I guess good luck getting to 6-7 wins here. Yeah, that's very possible. So, I mean, you got to face the mighty Jerry Hughes 2 times in 3 weeks, week 15 and 17. No, I mean, honestly, the weak teams in terms of pass rush here are probably the Colts and the Jags, and then the Saints. So I guess good for you at least that 2 of those are divisional teams. But your defense, for what it's worth, really matches up poorly against the likes of the Jaguars. Yeah, matches up really poorly against the likes of Cincinnati. They're doing some different things with Trayvon Walker, and we'll talk about that. But if Trayvon Walker takes the next step, Devin Lloyd plays well, Josh Allen, like it's not.
Yeah, there's good. Yeah, there's talent.
It's not an easy front. Like, that's not a super easy front. Dwayne Smoot, and obviously I keep talking about the Jaguars and the Tennessee. Like, he'll be back eventually. He's mid-October kind of thing. You won't see him. God, he might be back for both Jacksonville games. Like, you'd want to play that defensive line a little earlier while Smoot is still injured. But yeah,
real quick comment on this.
It's
schedule.
A struggle for me.
Yeah,
it's good for travel. It's not great just in general because, like you mentioned, all the pass rushes and just the fact that you're not good, I guess.
There's one game on here where Tennessee's going to be super duper live to pull off the upset because they're going up against a team that just does not have pressure that can wreck this game. And actually, I like the over as much as I like Tennessee. And it's week 1 against the Saints at New Orleans. I think that actually spells maybe the best betting plan of attack for any early season team we have besides the Commanders, who love week 1 and cannot wait to fade week 2. Tennessee is going to come out and give you a game effort and score into the 20s against the Saints, I think. People have not wrapped their head around the Saints being a beatable defense, and that total is sitting at 41. That's too low. I think then there's a chance that Titans-Chargers total, maybe if the Titans pull off the upset, maybe we catch a Chargers -3, and maybe we catch Charger, maybe a total that's in the low 40s there, and that looks like an opportunity for the Chargers to pitch like a shutout, because if they can generate a pass rush against that Tennessee O-line, Tennessee might be in deep freaking trouble. Although it is worth noting that Tennessee and Derrick Henry match up pretty well against the rush defense that the Chargers tried out there. So maybe I'm a little ahead of myself here, but I'm going to be very, very excited to see how the total market is shaped through the first 4 weeks, because I can see kind of increasing distress with the pass rushes that this team faces early in the season.
And truthfully too, I'm not super sold on Baltimore as a pass rushing front.
Sure.
Good linebackers, better. The secondary is improving, but there's a few spots, and I mean, even it depends how you feel how Miami will improve in that right too. There's a few spots against some teams they're sizable to medium-sized dogs that maybe won't have the best pass rush that'll make them look a little better than they can. But at the same time, I think I was kind of hoping to go into the research. I had a bunch of notes, but I topped it off today, and I'm like, man, I hope I find some things that put me off the Jaguars to win the division a little more. It was kind of the fucking opposite, man. Like I felt worse about it after I dug more into Tim Kelly, the offensive coordinator. I felt worse about it when I looked at, the changes. Just they were hamstrung with salary cap stuff, and the fact that they're sitting here not quite in a spot where they can move on from quarterback and start a rebuild. So they're definitely a purgatory team. Like the best case scenario for a Nashville resident is like
7.
Yeah, Tannehill gets turf toe in week 1, and like this team sucks. And the other positive about that is you likely play Will Levis, and you get to see what you have there.
Yeah,
you know what you have in Willis. So
yeah, interesting. Getting a lot of Willis in the preseason. Do you have a sense if he's in QB2 this season? I guess it depends on Levis's health, right?
So yeah, that's the thing. Will Levis, was hurt in the joint practice with the Vikings, so he didn't end up playing in week 2. We're a couple days away. They have a Friday game, which is even worse for that because he has fewer days to kind of get back to it. He's saying, and Vrabel's saying like, oh, I really want to play Friday, but like he still had a pretty big wrap on his leg in practice today. So,
I will say this though,
Malik Willis played the entire second game. It was okay.
Yeah. I will say that the one thing that Levis was known for last year was playing through injury. So he's not going to call his own number and say I can't go. He's going to say I can go. It's just a question of whether the Titans let him, I guess. Let's look at the odds. My
he played 4 drives in the first preseason game. It wasn't awe-inspiring by any means. Especially,
I saw one clip of him making a nice pass one time this preseason, so that means something, right?
Yeah, it was so. And Willis started that game. It was mostly Chicago backups, and then Levis took over. And I mean, against backups, and it wasn't great. So I'm not super excited about the future of the quarterback either way. 60-1 to win the Super Bowl with the odds here, 40 to win the AFC. Those numbers, missing a 0. AFC South 3-1, 310. Probably should be 5. I'd take the 2 teams we talked about Monday before I took the Titans. I think at that price. At price, yeah. 2-1 to make the playoffs, roughly -250 to miss. I don't hate -250. It's just really hard to picture them winning 9-10 games, finding that wild card. The win total is juicy over 7.5. There are a lot of games that are lined right around that coin flip up to about 3 or 4. So if they trend to the good, that win total is probably about right. Yeah. I tend to think that plus money in the under might be a decent bet.
I do as well. I have not made a case for a lot of win totals. This is one that I show some decent value on the under, actually.
I'm kind of out on win totals this year.
So you said the upside case of 9 or 10 wins. I have a 21% chance through simming the season that the Titans win 9 or more games. So that is not likely to make the playoffs. My median projection for this team is 6. My mean is 6.5. So under 7.5 at plus money is a fair bet. I'm not exactly sure why that's juiced to the over, other than there's a legacy like with the Steelers of winning games that they shouldn't be winning. And maybe that ultimately happens, but Titans look like an all under to me. Wow.
Yeah, I'm kind of there too. I pulled up my preseason notes to kind of look at that over too.
I'm assuming that you get
Ty Spears is like my highlight of this team right now.
These numbers that I'm quoting you to, I'm assuming you're getting 14 games out of Tannehill. That might be a little bit rich.
Dan, can we pull the schedule up one more time quick too? I wonder if there is a spot here. Maybe this is a team that it sucks because, when a team kind of has a rough start and the second half of the schedule is a little softer, there's always like, well, maybe we can back them then. But like the standard bet would be to win the division, to make the playoffs. Like those numbers would have to be really big for me to even consider it. So I think maybe to Patrick's point in the chat, it might be and Wilkman just pointing out under now and maybe a late middle. Like if you see some signs of life and they have Carolina, Indy, Houston. We'll see where Seattle's at. See where some of these teams are at. Even Tampa. Maybe there's a case to be made for taking that late adjusted regular season win total over at some point. But also, if things are going really rough, does Tannehill miss time without being injured? Oh, Charles Saul just saying it too. What game do we see Levis? Like, there's a decent chance that, hey, this team's bad, but it's getting easier. Maybe I should back them to win a few games here. And then they surprise you by pulling Tannehill and starting, Will Levis. And then all of a sudden that's not as fun of a bet anymore. And you're feeling pretty awful. So I'm not super, I don't know. I'm not going to be super vigilant on entrance points on the Tennessee Titans for a positive bet. And I think, of all the win totals we've talked about, this is one where I guess I'm surprised the price is where it's at. I would think it'd be slightly juiced to the under.
The bellwether game for the Titans is going to be that Falcons game coming off the bye. If they're coming out of their bye with the adjustments they need at the offensive line, they've played some tougher pass rushes. They're going up against a team that can't necessarily lean into the pass funnel. That's probably a decent time to buy low on Titans against the Falcons. Sad as it is to say, as I am a bull on the Falcons, that's the bellwether game.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where the Falcons pass rush is at that point with David Amenyata, Grady Jarrett, the aforementioned Bud Dupree,
Bud Dupree, Calais Campbell.
Does
Art Smith have a couple of aces up his sleeve for his old boss, or vice versa?
That's one of those. That is one of those pass rushes that has a chance to be okay and maybe more than okay. So if that's coming true through the first 7 weeks. Like, oh, this team's coming off the bye and the Falcons are not that great. But if that pass rush is good, it's a weird game. So range of outcomes. 3 to 8.
I think that's correct. Good call. The center body and range of my projections are 3 to, I guess, really 4. I have a 10% chance they win 4 games. I have a 10% chance they win 8 games, and then 13, 15, 15 in between. So yeah, 10% chance or more that they win 3, 4, 5, 6, or really 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think 3 is pretty pessimistic.
What is one thing that has to happen for them to win 10 games? I don't know that a lot of the answer to that question is like, what does it take to outperform your win total by 3 or 4 games? The answer to a lot of those questions are, well, you got to have Geno Smith has to suddenly be good. Like a lot of the answers are at quarterback. I think we have a big enough body of work from Tannehill where it's not just be like, hey, he's going to take this massive step forward and carry this team. I mean, he's played with AJ Brown. It's those teams were good, but they were good in different ways. We saw those teams win a lot differently. It wasn't, Tannehill's Mahomes. So it's hard to make any cases for that.
No,
but,
looking at my Sims here, for them to get to 10 wins, they have to have a top 3 defense, and they're winning games 20-17.
Fair.
That's how it happens. And I think that's possible because this defense is the defensive line, especially. We haven't really seen them with Landry.
Yeah,
they were good last year. Maybe they're not as much of a pass funnel because the pass rush is actually good. I don't know. It could be excellent. I'm not ruling out that the defense is the unit that carries these guys.
And again, that if the defense is greatly overperforming, you're playing both the rookie quarterbacks in your division twice.
Exactly.
You're playing Bryce Young. You're playing Baker Mayfield. You're playing Kenny Pickett. You're playing Desmond Ridder. Who knows what we have with Carr and Watson. You're playing Geno Smith. Maybe there's regression. Who knows if Tua makes it to week 14. There's a lot of chances for this defense to shine if it's good. So I guess, that is the case. So betting plan of attack is we need a lot more answers to determine what kind of team this is, because if this defense does take a step forward, then it's the same as last year where we're seeing these totals drop to 40 by week 8.
They're starting at 40. It's 41. I think this is a week 1 over. I don't like any overs week 1 except for this game, really. Maybe the Seahawks game.
Yeah, it's a lot of trust you're putting in this offense.
Yeah.
Get to 20.
Hey, Hopkins is healthy right now. Not dinged up at all. Henry is healthy right now. I'm not here to precipitate or to predict that there's going to be a sudden drop off on his form. He's built different. He's barely human. He's a tractor.
After their week 6 bye, how many times did they get to 20 points last year?
1.
Twice.
Yeah. That sounds right. I mean, this
Packers. The win at Lambeau. That was the thing. They had some nice wins. Like the win at Lambeau was nice, and then they scored 22 against the Jags in a game they lost by 2 touchdowns anyway.
Oh, I forgot about that. There was garbage time points in that one.
Yeah, that wasn't like an amazing offensive performance by any means. So, this is a team that we're not bullish on, but there's so freaking much uncertainty on what this is going to be with a new OC, with a new star receiver, with a healthy quarterback, with a completely reshuffled offensive line of that guys, and the possibility of a decent defense. So
this is the last.
I'm not excited about this team, but if they were to get to 8 wins, it would surprise me.
They're going to keep this defensive nucleus together. This is Tannehill's last ride. I don't think D-Hop is probably coming back. Maybe he will. But this is kind of the way it's going to be for the Titans for the next couple of years. I would put their over-under at next playoff appearance at 26.5 right now.
Do you remember they were the 1 seed 2 years ago?
I do. Now they got a bully in their division in Trevor Lawrence. They in trouble for.
Let's get to that. Let's put a bow on the highlight of the season for me is still just they're going to wear those Oilers uniforms.
Oh, hell yeah.
So clean. So, all right, that's it for the Titans. We'll catch you guys.
They're doing it against Houston too.
For the Jaguars. Good. Rub it in their face. You lost your franchise.
Welcome to the deep dive. Your
Jaguars
AFC,
edition.
Your Jaguar. Let's shag it up. The AFC South favorites are the Jacksonville Jaguars. We are 2 years removed from this team picking first overall in the NFL draft in back-to-back years. And yet here we are where they are minus 150 or something like that to win the AFC South. And I belly laugh that is not a big enough number. This Jags team is for real. I think that there is a very realistic possibility, Andy, that First Take is doing segments in October, November of, do the Jags have the best wide receiver room in the NFL? Is it better than Cincinnati? There's a realistic chance here that these guys are going to be catching a lot of teams by surprise with exactly what they are bringing to the table offensively. Year 2 with Peterson and Trevor Lawrence together. You had just incredible growth over the balance of, the Trevor Lawrence's sophomore season. Now you combine that with an elite offensive weapon. The last time we saw this happen was the year that Josh Allen exploded with Stephon Diggs. Different Diggs. But adding Stephon Diggs to the mix with Josh Allen was enough to launch him into MVP consideration. And if you sit back and you look at this squad and what the addition of Calvin Ridley means, I think it is completely fair to think that is within the realm of possibility in terms of taking him to elite status as a quarterback in the NFL.
You know what I did?
Yeah.
Because a guy forgets about Calvin Ridley. He had that home invasion thing. He had his mental health break. He gambled during his mental health break. He missed the suspension. Traded while suspended, which is weird and makes you forget about it. I went and watched some college highlights because I saw some preseason, and I don't even think it was a game. It was just camp highlights. It's like, fuck, this guy can move. This guy's crisp. He's got them soft hands. He just looks huge. He looks good. So I went and watched like a little YouTube montage of some college highlights. Like, shit, this guy is. I mean, this was one of those things where it's like, oh man, we're gonna put him across from Julio. This is gonna work. And he was a high end prospect. He is very good. They got a lot out of Kirk last year, and truthfully, like 2021 just felt like. I mean, I'm just in my mind. I'm just gonna pretend they didn't start T-Law because it was just a lost year in his, in his progression as a quarterback. It was such a goofy thing. And, obviously let's quick pop back to 2022, where, as I mentioned in the Titans podcast, they started 3-7, ended up winning the division on the last day. But it was a rocky start because you put the Urban in the rear view, brought in a Super Bowl winning coach. It's like, all right, this should be smooth sailing, but he still had a lot to work out. And, it's one of those things you're excited when you have all this free agent money and you sign Christian Kirk, you sign Evan Ingram, you signed, Brandon Scherf, you signed a bunch of players. They spent more money than anybody that offseason, but it's still, you're bringing in a new coach, you're bringing in a quarterback who might as well be a rookie at that point, and you're bringing in a lot of new pieces and obviously new play callers, new everything, and it just weird. It didn't start out well, and I've read a couple different reports on basically like turned out they were good at self-evaluation and they figured out what Trevor was struggling with, what the team was struggling with, because they struggled a lot with pressure. And you can go look at the splits, and the Football Outsiders Almanac does a good job of this. They take some of the SIS data, basically said like, hey, at a certain point they figured it out. They stopped using five-step drops at this rate. It went way down. They were basically, it's almost like an in-game adjustment. We're like, hey, they're getting a lot of pressure. We got to get the ball out quick now. But they did it for the rest of the season. They started doing a lot more quick, a lot more underneath, a lot more, outlet, and just not letting him struggle with that sort of pressure. And his stats, if you look at the kind of first half, second half stats for the year, he took kind of a really big step mid-season. And this was an offense and a team, and I guess you can attribute some of this to the coach and where he's been at with his career, but they had some games they were absolutely out of. And it wasn't a team that I guess was built for these crazy comebacks, but they did it like 5 or 6 times. There was a good, my favorite thing to do when I'm researching teams, especially when you're looking at last year, is go look for one of the fan sites. They always write these articles in like February, and it doesn't matter if the team, what they did. They're like, hey, here's like 20 positive takeaways from the season, because that's what fans want to read. They want hope for next year. And I don't have the attribution for who wrote this, but they had 5 comebacks that totaled 80 points down.
Oh my God.
Cumulative D. That number sounds really big, right? But
yeah,
the Chargers one obviously bulks that up, but they were down, and all of them, this was technically, and it wasn't just like 5 random games. These were their last 5 home games of the season. They were down by a total of 80 points total. So they were down 17 points in a 27-20 victory over the Raiders, 9 points in a 28-27 win over the Ravens, 17 points in that overtime win over the Cowboys, 10 points in the, like I mentioned, the win over the Titans, and obviously 27 points over the Chargers in the playoffs. And it's funny too, I think at least 2 of those were defensive touchdowns to win the game, because the Cowboys game for sure ended on a interception return in overtime. And there was another game, so maybe the Raiders one, where it was like a fumble recovery touchdown to win the, that ended up winning that game. So it wasn't all the offense, but it was it was a team that kind of turned the tables there, and it didn't matter how hard the chips were down late in the season. They stayed in games and they did it up. And yeah, Calvin Ridley, comeback player of the year. I don't know how many votes he's going to get for having a gambling suspension with the old school media, but it's just crazy. And then, yeah, down the stretch, 7 of in those final 9 games where they won 7 of them, our guy, Trevor, 15 touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
Wow.
And yeah, the passer rating went from 71 in 21 to 95, which is the 5th largest improvement in NFL history from a player from first to second season.
Wow.
I think so. All that to say is I think it was okay. I know, a little controversial. I think it was okay getting rid of Urban Meyer.
Yeah. I'm having conflicting thoughts on Urban Meyer because I've been watching a lot of the Netflix series with the Gators.
There's so many bad reviews. I haven't had a chance yet.
There were? Well, I loved it.
Everyone made it sound like
because I went to a couple of those games. I bet all those games. It was definitely watched, no doubt. And I hate Urban Meyer. And I was just like, tell my wife, I was like, we're going to watch this, but do not fall for this guy. He's a piece of shit.
He's a huckster.
He's a huckster, yeah. But
yeah, they made it sound like they made an OJ documentary, and it's just like OJ golfing. Like, there's left out the stuff.
There's an enormous amount of crime that was not included for sure. Yeah. It was at the very tail end, but
that's what I was hoping it was.
The stuff where they win
much crime.
I know the stuff where they win their first title though over the Buckeyes was wild because like I was betting college football at the time. Like I was plugged in on all that, and it was fascinating. Anyway, all that any behind the scenes look is awesome. And Tim Tebow, weird dude. I don't know if you know that. He's a weird dude. All right. The real quick, the comebacks that you were just reflecting on for the Jaguars. By the way, Tim Tebow, Jacksonville guy. Didn't catch on with the Jaguars and Urban Meyer when he was there, but he tried. The comebacks you mentioned were notably against some pretty good teams, Andy. Cowboys, Ravens.
Yeah.
Chargers. Like, these were not chumps. These were not pushovers. This is not you came back on Jeff Saturday's Colts. These were teams that could have, should have probably put you away, and you fought back in, and I love that. Also noteworthy to me that Trevor Lawrence bounced back from the worst first half debut of any quarterback we've seen in a long time in the playoffs. He threw 5 or 15 interceptions in the first half, I forget. But it was an aggressively poor start to his playoff career, and he fought through it. That kind of resiliency matters to me. I love that type of love that stuff.
Said that somewhere. If that game would have just ended at halftime, if he'd have been benched or whatever, it'd have been the worst playoff performance besides the Kerry Collins Super Bowl.
Oh wow!
Which was against it. Like,
wow! An all universe defense. Yeah,
I mean, couple Hall of Famers on that defense. So
yes, probably the best defense that's ever taken the field. If we're being honest, the fact that the Jaguars had so much resiliency is, to me, a credit to Doug Peterson. That the guy is a good coach. I don't know what to tell you here. He took Nick Foles and won a Super Bowl against Belichick. We didn't need more data points, but we've gotten them. And taking over the Jaguars, keeping that team focused despite a poor start to their season, keeping that team, rowing the boat together, and coming back from a 2 and Jesus Christ, they were 2-6. Is that right? 2-7. 1, 2, 3,
3 and
4, 5,
7.
6, 2 and 6.
They got
2
that
and 6, 3 and 7.
4 and 7.
3 and yeah. 2-6 start is a good reason to. Well, we'll get them next year, coach. But honestly, they spent so much money and they had so little flexibility. At the end of 2022, that if they hadn't turned things around, won the division, gone into the playoffs, and gotten this, Lawrence's feet wet in playoff experience, I don't think I would feel solid about this team this year at all, because we would be like, man, they had no flexibility to address the problems with their roster, so they did nothing. Lawrence still hasn't proven anything in the playoffs. Like, there would be a lot of reasons to doubt this Jaguars team that I have kind of moved well past, because they did, they fought through it last year, because they, won their first playoff game as a unit. And I am perfectly fine believing that this team, with this soft schedule that they are presented with, can win enough games to be a factor in the AFC. And when I say that, what I mean is the 1 seed in the AFC playoff picture comes with an absolute monumental amount of leverage in terms of winning the conference. Like, what has gone unsaid when people reflect on how good the AFC is and how weak the NFC is relatively, is that the strength overall in the AFC means your 7th seed playoff team could be an absolute nightmare to face. And the 1 seed will face no one. They will get rest. They will be at home for 2 potential games to go to the Super Bowl. And when I look at the fact that the Jaguars have the potential to have a top 5 offense in football, combined with this weak schedule within the AFC and the cleanest path, in my opinion, to a division championship, I think 1 seed is on the table, which means AFC is on the table, which means Super Bowl is on the table. And those prices are not reflective of that. So this was the first bet I made this season. We've talked about it, I know, at least once back in our offseason pods. And it may be ultimately just, pissing into the wind. But this Jaguars team ceiling is 100% championship potential. And, maybe the defense is so porous that ultimately they can't get there. But I'm looking at an NFL this season that has lots of question marks at offensive coordinators, lots of question marks at quarterback, new coordinators, new quarterbacks everywhere. And you have continuity here. You have a guy who's on the come up, who is generational prospect. I don't think anyone in the world would be like, wow, can you believe Trevor Lawrence is in the MVP discussion in December this year? No, of course they won't. No, be like, yeah, he's year 3. He should be.
His ceiling is legitimately like, hey, he threw for 5,500 yards and like 35 touchdowns, and that puts you in the MVP discussion. I think you bring up a good point with the continuity and what I alluded to earlier with the the changes they made to the offense to kind of turn it around. Like you have that. You have that same offensive coordinator. You have that same offensive, the continuity you have at coaching, and maybe taking this next step and then adding Calvin Ridley to that, adding another piece to the running back core in Bigsby. And they too, when you do it, what they did in 2021 into 2022, and they spend $170 million in free agency, it kind of hamstrings you, like you said, the next year. And I did like the move from the front office, because there weren't a ton of things they need. Everybody needs a lot of things, but where they were in the first round, they did have some flexibility to move back, and they did it twice. And they moved back 3 spots and added 5 picks by doing that in the first round. I think that was kind of always the plan was, hey, we can't go out and go nuts in free agency. So what if we had like 30 draft picks?
Yeah, we better swing away. Yeah, let's swing away.
They made so many day 2 and day 3 picks. They made multiple trades after that. They traded back with Chicago. They got Tank Bigsby. They got Anton Harrison. That ended up being their first round pick, the offensive tackle. Devil's avocado with this team. The offensive line is a little thinnish, and it's a bit of an issue, to the point where they started a tackle at guard and moved some things around in the preseason game. It sounds like they're getting some pieces back here. What is his name? Barch. I got to look at the depth chart here. Ben Barch sounds like he's going to be back soon. That was the reason they had to move Walker Little into guard and just keep Anton Harrison. I think at his natural left tackle spot, but it sounds like he's going to right, Little's going to left. Ben Barch goes back to the left guard spot. It's just thin afterwards. The depth isn't great on the offensive line, and obviously they had some issues last year, so they do need some people to step up there. Otherwise, the rest of this offense is kind of fucking sad.
Yeah. I ranked the Jags as the 9th best offense in football. I have the offensive line as the 1 week unit, and they're 21st. And that's assuming Harrison, no Robinson. Once Robinson comes back, you'll get a little bit of a bump. And I think just generally the ability of Doug Peterson to kind of, and honestly, like Trevor Lawrence has been under duress almost his whole career, really. Like there hasn't been any years where he has been well protected, and he's been kind of forced to figure out how to play quarterback while under pressure pretty consistently. And, to the degree that he learned through last season how to operate while dealing with pressure, I think is going to benefit them this year. I do like, when healthy, their interior offensive line is at least a little bit more formidable. My questions for them really are at the tackle position. And if he's getting the ball out of his hands in 2.3 seconds or whatever, then, tackle and edge.
Yeah, where do you have Fortner rated as far as a center? Because Scherf's good.
I have
Fortner
should
be fine when he's back.
I have Fortner as a good center. I have Scherf as a good guard. In fact, that's your strength right there. Center and right guard, good. I think and once Cam Robinson comes back, your entire right side is good. I think the skill position group is really where I am being conservative in my rankings, and I have these guys 6th best right now. There is a very real possibility that we are revisiting this in the season and saying it's number 1. And moving everybody down the depth chart one slot and putting Calvin Ridley in at wide receiver 1, assuming he stays healthy, that has electric potential. Specifically using Christian Kirk as your slot.
Yeah, getting him to be so. The thing is, like, you get a true, deep threat over the top, whatever you want to call it, but a true one who can move the chains but also play some deep ball. It just allows you to use Christian Kirk how you're supposed to use him. And you have a really good tight end in Evan Ingram. So those guys, plus the 2 running backs who obviously can both catch balls, like the fact that everybody I just listed can suddenly do all the middle and underneath stuff, like there's a very good opportunity for this offense to be just, maybe not this high-powered, high-octane thing that we're all just in awe of every week when they put up 40, but just super bleeping efficient. And they were very good in the red zone. That was another spot where Lawrence struggled early in the year. He threw a lot of bad passes and interceptions in the red zone early, really cleaned that up. They were efficient in the second half in the red zone. Obviously, that's how you win all those games late. So if that continues and we see this really nice, short to intermediate game from all those guys, boom. Like Calvin Ridley.
We're cooking.
Calvin Ridley is like, it's exciting for him to get the ball, but what he does for the rest of the offense is super exciting to me.
Yeah. Etienne,
especially with just
in
a whole nother
Ingram
season,
another year. Yeah,
a whole other offseason of Press Taylor to work with all these players and kind of implement the system.
Yep. Bigsby's a perfect fit. Etienne is a great fit. Ingram is a terrible blocker, but a good fit. You hate him?
I like him. I like him as a player, but I hate that there's 2 players called Tank now. Because I'm sure I meant to say Tank Dell. I'm 90% sure I said Tank Bigsby on that Houston podcast.
No, you said Tank Dell.
Did I say Tank Dell?
Yeah.
I feel like I've mixed them up in my head at least.
Maybe. I heard. Well,
one of them has to change.
Maybe I heard Tank Dell because I knew that's
one of them has to change their name.
Well, whoever finishes higher in Rookie of the Year voting, I guess, will give the official Tank designation. The other one becomes just a guy. No, everything about the way that they're rostered looks great to me on offense if the offensive line can stay healthy. The defense is a bit of a different story. I diverge here from conventional wisdom about this defense. People are kind of picking at a lot of their performance metrics from last year and just saying these guys weren't very good as a unit. They added no one. How are they going to be better? I kind of shrug and I'm like, yeah, I guess, but they still have a lot of draft capital and a lot of guys who at times showed pretty impressive flashes. You mentioned it in terms of like the way they came up with game-breaking plays, particularly in a couple of those comeback wins. There's just like a lot of kind of capable guys here. I don't see an obvious weakness outside of the nickelback. I liked their secondary a ton. I have a very, very high grade on Tyson Campbell. I have a very high grade, or I guess a good grade on Darius Williams. I like both their starting safeties. I want to
stop you right there too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Darius Williams, I love that you have an okay grade on him because I upgraded him a little too, just kind of reading more and more about last year.
Sure.
He was a struggle bus. He was the Trevor Lawrence of the defense. Struggle bus first half of the season, playing slot. Couldn't do it. Put him out wide where he belonged. He was very good. So I think if you went and looked, and this is a pain in the ass just to upgrade one player, but if you went and looked at where he actually lined up and looked at the grades he got when he was out wide for the second half of the season, he graded out a lot better and he played a lot better. So I think I'm with you there, and that's part of the reason. But obviously we love Campbell, and if Williams is put in the right position, and obviously when you have coaches that are willing to do that, like, hey, we got to move this guy to where he belongs because we're trying to do round peg square hole here. It's not working. And then you see an instant improvement. You go out and get, the guy who led the league in tackles the last 2 years from Atlanta. You see if you can get Josh Allen's very good. You're starting to you asked a lot out of Trayvon Walker, kind of changing what he did. And it's got to be weird to play with the Georgia defense because just everybody around you is so good. And, you're asked to do a certain amount of things, but you don't have to do everything. So he's put in a different situation. I think we see an improvement there this year. That's kind of what you're hearing out of camp as well, too. He's getting more comfortable, and they're going to use him in more spots where he's been comfortable, where he was.
I don't need any more teal Kool-Aid. Stop. I don't need any more teal Kool-Aid in. Because that's kind of really where the ceiling of the team emerges, which is that, they ultimately oh, wow, that's an interesting stat, Jay. Ultimately, they don't like the defense is solid. The spooky part is cornerback depth. Like if something happens to Tyson Campbell, then
Andrew Wingard at backup safety.
Oh, buddy. All of the secondary depth, even the nickelback, like Trey Herndon, not my guy. There is a good amount of spookiness if there are cornerback injuries to this team.
I do wonder if this Gregory Jr. pushes Trey Herndon a little. He's had some nice moments in camp, and I think that's a bit of a tenuous grasp on that spot.
Okay.
So it'd be interesting to see what we see there. And
I would love to see some of these young guys pop. Really would be a huge breath, deep sigh of relief. You mentioned, some of the pieces here in the front seven. No one that's really going to blow you away with their numbers, but they're all solid and their depth is okay. I like Devin Lloyd more than anyone else, apparently. My numbers say he's going to be a good linebacker for the foreseeable future. People just cannot help but point out he got benched at some point last season. I don't know why. I have no clue why.
You add Olakun, you get a little more out of Trayvon Walker, and I think it's one of those rising tide kind of things where I think all the linebacker plays can improve. The whole front's going to improve come October. You're going to get Dwayne Smoot back. You just, like you said, you need to stay healthy in this defensive secondary, and it can be a pretty good defense.
So let me ask you about Trayvon Walker a little bit more then. So this defense all of a sudden is AFC Championship contending, Super Bowl contending, if Trayvon Walker is a factor. And I have no clue if he's any good or not. But he was taken first overall. So somebody out there sees a path. He's a guy that I'm going to watch and very, very carefully look out for tape all season long. Because this is ejecto-cito, any kind of hopes for these team in the playoffs if he doesn't turn into a blue chip pass rushing force to be reckoned with. Because while this defense on paper is not like going to lose you games, it sure as shit isn't beating the Chiefs or the Bills. I'm sorry. Like AFC Championship, you might be conceding 30 points with this unit on the field, right? Unless Walker becomes a more disruptive factor. So he is the entire leverage of this team, in my opinion, being actually championship contending and bringing some of these absurd prices that we got in February home.
So it was one of those things like, hey, you're a big guy, you're athletic as shit, and you played on a really good team. And there's quotes from him saying, like, I hate to like misphrase this because he didn't come across as lazy. He just said there's a lot to figure out, like at the next level, especially when you're not just, hey, let's, we're Georgia. We're just
he's all the raw talent.
Everybody's all world all here. And there's been some good quotes from some of the coaches too, is like he's starting to get the little things, like the adjustments you need to make based on the the protections. He's starting to figure things out. They're doing things to get him in better positions to improve on his sack total, get movement inside a little, keep him outside where when they want him out there. It's hopefully we're hearing the right things, that he steps forward. Josh Allen, not Bills Josh Allen, the other Josh Allen has made some had some nice quotes about him too, saying he thinks he just like what he's seeing early in the season and in camp, he thinks he's like set up to dominate this year. So and it was always that thing. Somebody put it pretty well too. They said like the Aiden Hutchinson was more ready to like, hey, you can plug and play this guy. He'll be good right now if you put him in the right spot. Whereas like Walker's a better prospect. It just might take a little while. So I don't know. I read that last year during the draft. Dude. I read it again this preseason. So that's the hope, is like, hey, this is going to take a little bit to get it to its potential.
He's got 17 games. Because this team is not winning playoff games in a very crowded AFC unless they have a more formidable factor on defense, I think. With that, offseason grade, a B. I mean, you kept everybody together, I guess. They lost the additions, subtractions are non-factors for me.
Continuity, you didn't have a lot of wiggle room. You did a nice job drafting. You kept your coaching staff together. Yeah. Calvin Ridley, I guess if you want to count that as offseason.
I think you have to.
Middle of last season. I'm going to.
B plus. Okay.
I'm giving it a B plus.
Okay. Let's look at the schedule, which is the X factor here. The most important part of the schedule, Andy, is week 5. We have known for a long time who the Jaguars' opponents were going to be this season, but we did not know that they were going to turn a road game at Buffalo into a de facto home game in London. That is kind of one of the weirder decisions I've ever seen the NFL make from a scheduling wrinkle standpoint. Jacksonville obviously elected to have 2 games in a row in London, and but just the fact that the second of those is their opponent's home game is kind of bananas. I think with the known travel advantage of you having already adjusted to the time and them coming to you. It's got to make that a kind of more of a coin flippy type of game. The fact that you get KC at home early-ish in the season when their defense is not necessarily at their peak, and when the offense is potentially kind of coming off of an ass kicking of the Detroit Lions, as opposed to really sharp and focused and like knows that you are a contender and that you are a force to be reckoned with. I think that's a good time of the season to face KC week 2. Your tougher tests against Cincinnati, Cleveland, Baltimore, all in a row, bang, 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 late in the season. I mean, I'm in spin mode here. So positive spin on that is that sharpens you for a playoff run. I like that all of those games are relative coin flips. You're coin flippy against San Francisco. You get them at home coming off your bye. You get a travel advantage on over them in that spot as well, assuming that's not San Francisco spending a week on the East Coast preparing, which I don't recall seeing that that's a back-to-back East Coast roadie for San Francisco. But realistically, there are a lot of AFC South teams on this list, and there are a lot of NFC South teams on this list, Andy. And you know who sucks? The AFC South and the NFC South.
I thought you were going to go there. Yeah, and it not exactly an iron sharpens iron moment heading into the playoffs, but the last 3 games of the season are they're all candidates for teams that are packing it in at that point. Tennessee, Carolina. I mean, these are teams that could be eliminated, nothing but to play spoiler, except for the fact that, Tennessee is probably at that point starting a rookie quarterback. Carolina is still starting a rookie quarterback and trying to figure it out. Tampa Bay, who knows if we're still where we're at the Baker Mayfield.
We're in trash. Yeah, we're in
we
trash.
Might be
time,
in trash territory. So you might have a nice little runway to the, hey, everybody else is playing tough games against divisional opponents week 18, and you just have to beat Will Levis to get the 1 seed if things turn out right. I like the end of the season. I like the double dip in London. Like I mentioned on the Indy pod, I kind of hate the return game where the brains can be scrambled. That looks
like death on that looks like an absolute
Widowmaker
spot.
We spent too much time eating bangers and mash, and we're on the wrong time schedule.
Widowmaker spot. Hate it. I don't know that they lose that game to Indy, but I sure should have taken the points with the Colts on that one. No doubt about it.
I hope that's like 8 by then.
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, if they beat Buffalo, if they beat KC, they really only have to beat one of those 2 teams to get like a decent little bump, in terms of grading. You know what else kind of intrigues me about this, Andy, which kind of fueling some of my my bullishness? Not a lot of elite defenses on this list. They don't necessarily have like soft defenses. Like they're not playing the NFC North, which would have been nice if you really wanted to stat pad.
No, both sides of the bye are tough, and obviously, Cleveland, Baltimore's biggest. Although Baltimore's pass rush, I'm not so sure about. Still, I mentioned
still secondary too, man. I'm super about their secondary too now. Anyway, Humphrey being injured is a red flag for Baltimore secondary. But yeah, I mean, Jacksonville is going to be in the conversation for most points scored. I think they're going to be in the conversation for the 1 seed, and so I think if you want to capture like actually realizable upside on that team, I think that's where you attack. Yeah,
and as Jay is pointing out, that is a tough stretch. You get the I'm going to call it the scrambler because you're coming back off the back-to-back in London, and then 4 days later you go to the Big Easy. Like not only do you have that time adjustment game, but you have a short week heading into a New Orleans game there, followed by another road game, not a massive travel spot, but another road game against what should be an elite defense, another big test. So we're going to know a lot about the Jaguars by the time they hit the bye.
I think so too.
And there's a decent chance that San Francisco game is a 3, one way or the other.
True. That's true. That'll be a really fun game. They should have flexed. They should plan on flexing that into a prime time spot of some sort. That shouldn't be a 1 p.m. Sunday. Jags Niners is going to be great.
So the wildest thing to me is that they decided we should flex into Thursdays.
Yeah, I don't get that whatsoever.
The obvious answer is you should be able to flex into
Monday. Obviously,
because you move one team just moves back one day, which sucks for them, but play better and be a bigger draw on TV, I guess. But it's not as weird of a flex for either team. It's just a quick 1 day adjustment. So yeah, I hope the Thursday flex thing doesn't happen. Honestly, it seems like a mess.
It's pretty terrible. It's a pretty terrible call, and it's especially terrible to the fans because you're like, it's not. It's a cool thing to go like, oh, we got a 1 o'clock Sunday. Oh wow, we're in primetime Monday now. Cool. It's not to be like, oh, you just moved up the game 3 days and now it's on a Thursday. Like it's inconvenient as hell.
Yeah. I don't love it. I think Drew's phone might have died. Oh, he's back. What did you get a call? I can't hear you. Your mic is muted. While Drew figures out the tech, I'm guessing some asshole texted him. I should start texting him just to screw with him now because he was calling in on his phone there. But yeah, Dan, if you want to pull up the betting odds for our Jacksonville Jaguars this year, I think I saw 30. But yeah, Super Bowl 28, AFC 15, AFC South. Prohibitive favorites. Not super prohibitive, but minus 155 make the playoffs 1-2 for your horse racing fans, and plus 158 on the comeback. Win total is a juicy over 9.5. And Drew, I think I hear some clicking, so I think you're back.
Yeah, what's up, man? My mean wins for this team is 10. My median wins for this team is 11. That's because I have a lopsided distribution to them being good and their divisional opponents being bad. So over 9.5 minus 144 is not a play, but I would like an all over, please.
Yeah, I think this is a team that you approach in the same way you approached the Eagles last year. We said, hey, we're not betting this win total. We're betting them to get the 1 seed. Hey, we're not betting, them to make the playoffs. We're betting their coach of the year. We're betting their quarterback to win MVP. We're betting them to have the best record in the conference. Those are spread some bets out on some longer odds like that. Like Peterson's like a 20-1. Obviously, Lawrence isn't too far down the list on MVP. The 1 seed thing is usually phrased by most wins. I think it's just most wins markets. I'm not 100% sure what the Jags are in that. If somebody wants to pull that up, Robert Papa Calls says he saw 10-1. Jacksonville gets the 1 seed. Don't hate that. I think that's just another fun. That's essentially just an alt over. Like that's a over 13.5 kind of move, I suppose. I'm not 100% sure what it takes, but that would do it, I would think, depending on what Kansas City decides to do this year with Buffalo, Miami, some of the other good teams.
I like it.
So yeah. I think if you do want to get involved in this, it's the bigger prices. Super Bowl, AFC 1 seed, MVP, Coach of the Year. It's the longer odds things. It's not, hey, let's just find a good price on 10.5 or 9.5. And that's a good point too. I think the 1 seed and Trevor Lawrence MVP are very tied together. I had that same conversation earlier with someone. I said if he gets the 1 seed, the narrative is Josh Allen didn't get the 1 seed. Patrick Mahomes didn't get the 1 seed. Trevor Lawrence got the 1 seed. And even if his stats aren't as good as Mahomes or even, Allen, Hurts, so Lamar, some of the other quarterbacks that might put up some Kirk, it's like, hey, he got the 1 seed, 4,800 yards is enough to give him an award.
Yeah, I'm down to six men that I think can realistically win the MVP. And the one that I'm on the outs, the 6.5.
I think I named them all except Burrow.
Yeah, the one that I'm on the outs is not Burrow, it's Lamar, and it has to do with team success. I'm starting to really question whether the Ravens are good enough to get into enough team wins to get Lamar the nod. So I'm losing a little bit of faith there. But absolutely Mahomes, Allen, Burrow in some order at the top, probably that order, followed by Herbert, Hurts, and then Lawrence.
Yeah.
And then Lamar's just on the outside for me.
Dark horse case for Dak, but that number sucks. Like I'd need a 30. If he stays healthy, it's like 22 at some places.
His numbers are not going to be good enough. I don't think
he just has to stay healthy. I'm going to be the guy who's like the Mike McCarthy guy this year.
Okay,
I'm trusting him.
Okay, it's not crazy. I mean, the market is sold on him so hard that you're buying low. So
that's what I was surprised seeing that MVP price. I'm like, oh God, I thought I was going to get 40 or 50. What is this? That's what I'm saying. It's not bettable by any means, but he has the skill set and the players around him to put up a really nasty season. And it's the same kind of thing as like, hey, the Eagles are the class of the NFC. If the Cowboys are able to jump them in their own division, get some sort of 1 seed, there'll be buzz. So, what's the
Little Bull likes
range of
Purdy.
outcomes?
Real quick, I want to comment. Little Bull in the MVP conversation. Little Bull likes or has some Purdy at 55-1. It's not crazy. I'm not saying he has 0% chance, but I worry that even if he has a spectacular season, they're going to cut the pie into so many different pieces that it's going to be tough for him to really seize the MVP, right? Shanahan's going to get credit first. Skill position players are going to get credit second. The easy schedule that they have and the ease of the NFC in general. You cut the pie up so many different ways before he gets his fair share, and I think that ultimately stings him a little bit. But Purdy looks healthy and ready to go for week 1 by all accounts, man. He's going to be out there and he's going to be slinging. Elbow injury is not a factor, it turns out.
And basically all the quarterbacks we were worried about are fine. Garoppolo looked fine. Purdy looked fine.
Yep. They're all on the good stuff, whatever that is.
Clear and or the cream. Range of outcomes, I guess somewhere between 11 and 17 wins is where I have them.
Did you say 11 and 17?
Yeah, no.
Is that including playoff wins? Because including playoff wins, I am. That's fine. No.
8 to 13 with a long tail to the high end.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I mean, this could very, very well be a rerun of last year where things aren't clean. Injuries to the cornerback room, we already mentioned, could throw cold water on my Jags boner real quick. And I think the offense is a tough one for me to really believe that there's a problem brewing in any way, shape, or form outside of a Lawrence injury. So, and he is an available dude. Lawrence is not a guy that I really have much questions. Is he going to be, are you going to be scratching your head? Is he going to find his way onto the injury list? Although I would have said that about Herbert last year, and he broke his ribs week 2 and was never the same. So, crazy things happen.
That shit for no reason.
Played through it for no reason. That's right. So I agree with you. I think even with even with some black swan shit happening, this is still a team that's winning 8-9 games. And if everything goes right, particularly offensively, considering the schedule, the ceiling is probably 14, and that might be enough. That might be enough to win the AFC.
Jay's asking what has to happen for them to win the AFC. I think a big part of that is just that regular season success, not having to go to Buffalo in the playoffs, not having to go to Arrowhead, not having to go to Paycor, not having to go to, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Cleveland, any of those places, playing 2 games in Duval. That is 80% of the equation. And it's probably higher because if you've gotten to that point, then the defense is top 10, the offense is at least top 10, and the rest kind of sorts itself out. But like Drew said, there's so much leverage with the 1 seed in general, but especially in the AFC.
Do the mental exercise. The leverage on the 1 seed in the AFC is the entire game for futures this year. And if you don't get a piece of whoever is going to get that spot, you are going to probably not. You shouldn't be betting that market, I guess, right?
Yeah,
unless you're literally trying to get it.
Buffalo and Kansas City games are so fucking big.
Huge,
and this is what we mentioned in the Buffalo preview. Said Buffalo gets hosed with this travel spot to the Jags, and this legitimately might be something has a big bearing on who gets the 1 seed in the AFC.
So a couple of thoughts on this because this is fun to talk about. And we haven't really gotten here yet for the AFC broadly. And this is our last AFC pod. So this is a good one to kind of put a bow on the AFC, Andy. The last focused AFC pod. For this to happen, you have to finish ahead of Kansas City in standing. That must happen. I do not see a world where you are going to Arrowhead in an AFC championship game and going toe-to-toe with Mahomes and winning. Not now. Not at this stage. Maybe in future years, sure.
God, what a coaching matchup.
If you saw last year. And, it was an injury that influenced a lot of that outcome. But Jags were feisty in the second half of that game. The key is finishing ahead of Kansas City, I think. I think there's a very real chance that the AFC North winner is the 4 seed. The AFC North is so freaking good. Those guys are going to black and blue each other up all season. And you probably, whoever wins that division is probably coming in 4. If you can get the 1, Buffalo and KC are 2 and 3. That's it. The path is there because Buffalo and KC in the 2 and 3 are going to face really, really tough wild card opponents. Could be Chargers, could be Dolphins, could be Jets, could be Ravens, could be Browns, could be Steelers, could be Bengals. The Bengals very well could be a wild card team this year, right? Like that 2-7.
That would be very annoying to win your division and see Joe Burrow come to town.
Oh, that kind of feels like it's in the stars for the Bills, by the way. They're going to have to exercise their demons against the Bengals at home.
To be fair, like that, if the Jets are decent and the Patriots defense plays like it looks like it can, and obviously the Dolphins have an offense, like that division is a little more of a, there's a bit of a dogfight and beat each other up. And the Bills are a 3 seed playing the 6, and no, it's Cincy coming down.
Hey, another thing that helps the Jags, in my opinion, Kellen Moore and Justin Herbert make beautiful music together, and they knock the Chiefs into the wild card. That's in the range of possibilities in the AFC this year for sure.
Yeah, talk about so that is the 2 seed where you can still win it. It's like, oh no, the Jaguars are the 1 seed.
Yes,
us and 40,000 fans have to go to LA.
Dude, in fact, that's the kind of the one fundamental thing about the AFC playoff picture. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Chargers do not have home field advantage. Period. So if they get the 1 seed, then yes, they avoid the very, very difficult wild card game. But you're not scared about going to LA and getting a win. If that's the one, if that's your AFC, go to the coast. Although Chiefs lurking as a wild card, that's sucky. I think if again, this is. Can you
imagine being a division winner that?
Yeah,
you get the Bengals and Chiefs in rapid succession as wild card coming at you.
So. Andy, you ready?
It'd be fun no matter what.
You ready for my fan fiction of the season to get everything home?
Yeah, let's take it home.
Steelers steal the AFC North and are the 4th seed.
Yep.
In any order, Chiefs and Bills are 2-3, and the Jags get the 1. Okay. Your wild card teams include Cincinnati and Miami, and who else you want? Let's put Lamar in. We'll put Baltimore in.
The Browns.
Browns? Do you think the Browns are in there? Okay, Browns.
I'm kind of a Browns guy now.
Let's do 4-5 is Browns Steelers. The Steelers get it done, or no, the Browns actually. We'll give it to the Browns. We'll give the Browns a wild card win. They beat the Steelers, who Kenny Pickett has a stinker of a playoff debut. Yep. Bills and Chiefs take care of business. And then you get the vaunted Bills slay the dragon, beat the Chiefs, do the impossible. Meanwhile, the Browns come down to Jacksonville. You get probably, the Browns, Steelers, any of those wildcard teams come to town with you having an extra week to prepare. Love it. Love it. You take care of business in the divisional round and you host the Bills after they've slayed the dragon. And our deep sigh of relief. Spot in the deep sigh of relief. Let's say the Bills. The narrative will be at let's double it up. The Bills in the 3-6 beat the Bengals, and then they beat the Chiefs in the 2-3 in Arrowhead. And you get a nice double sigh of relief as the Bills, who have assumed they've won the Super Bowl, come to Jacksonville, and they are 3-point favorites, and the Jags and Doug Peterson win outright.
You know what the narrative though for Doug Peterson that week is?
Can he get it done with Nick Foles?
Why? No, I just especially if they beat Buffalo early in the year too. I wonder what that price would be.
Yeah, I think they're going to be dogs in the AFC Championship game at home against the Chiefs of the Bills. I would say almost certainly.
If they've gotten that far as a 1 seed,
dude, if the Bills conquer beat the Dragons, conquer, yeah, okay. No, but
you have to have a pretty massive upgrade to Jacksonville at that point.
Yeah.
Like, it's a top 3 power rating team at that point. So at home, at worst, I'd make Buffalo 1.5, 2 points better on a neutral. So it's a pick 'em.
Okay. The flip side of this is in a playoff setting. I give you all of the possibility in the world, Jags, of beating the Bills and the Chiefs in the regular season, especially where they fall sequencing. I am very nervous. It needs to be a special situational spot, I think, to beat them in the playoffs. And you're very, very, very long odds to get it done on the road, I think. So that's kind of where I'm at on the Jags and the AFC in general. And hopefully a 4 seed for the Steelers is enough to get Tomlin Coach of the Year home. You think it will be? You don't think so?
No, it can't be like win a shitty division after an 8-win season. It has to be for Coach of the Year, even with your narrative of how he's never got it. There has to be like a 4-win improvement. Like he has to win 12, 13 games, man. I don't think
Steelers win 12
11.
games. Steelers win 12 games and get the 4 seed, but they're behind the Jags, Chiefs, and Bills. Okay. Meanwhile, in the NFC, the 1 seed is the Cowboys, the 2 seed is the Niners. Your 3 seed is the Falcons, who have 10 wins. Your 4 seed is the Packers, who have 10 wins. Is that enough for Tomlin to get home? Dable's
Giants, the narrative with Dable was they just had 5 years of shit coaches, 3 really bad coaches, and finally you get the right guy in, and he improved their wins by like 5 or 6 from the previous year. So he had 2 pretty strong ones going for him there, plus the playoff berth. Whereas he's had too much success over the years, and they won 8 games last year.
And won 9.
No, wasn't it 8-1?
Oh, was it?
I think they're
Did they tie? Who did they tie?
I think there was a tie. Maybe I'm wrong.
Oh,
yeah, maybe
you might be right.
I'm gonna have to double check that. But yeah, like it's just not enough. And also in your scenario, Doug Peterson already has the award. Like,
you think
a 1 seed in the AFC?
Peterson is 19-1.
I saw some 20s. Like I'm not super excited, but
I feel like in that
I'm
scenario,
going to have a piece of that.
I feel like in that scenario that Lawrence is getting a bigger slice of the pie for MVP than Peterson is getting Coach of the Year. I
still think your Tomlin thing is the wackiest thing you have this season because they won too many games last year, and the ceiling isn't 12 or 13 wins. They're this 8 to 10 win team an awful lot, and if you win a bad division with 10 or 11 wins, and it's like they got a couple more wins than last year, and they're the 4 seed, nobody is like, hey, Kenny Pickett and Tomlin, let's put them ahead of the Peterson. Let's put him ahead of whatever. Maybe Sirianni has another sick year.
They're expected to finish 4th in their division, man, with a bullet. If they win their division, he's not in the conversation.
No, not unless it's like 12, 13 wins. It has to be a pretty big, like a 5-win improvement from last year. And the other thing too is like there's just too many people in the Coach of the Year conversation right now. Like there's guys that can just get these instant bumps off these narratives. Like, oh my God, LaFleur's doing it without Aaron Rodgers. Like all of a sudden he's second favorite. Dan Campbell's making it work. He just continues to shorten. Mike McCarthy took over play calling, and he's got the old touch. There's so many narrative guys. It's just a really crowded market.
I see.
Win it, but
I see it.
Tomlin has to have 12, 13 wins, I think. I'm not saying he can't win it. It's like they have to have a pretty good year, though.
Well, guess what, Andy?
That's where I said like Eberflus is a good opportunity without actually having that good of a team. Like Eberflus can do it with like 9 wins.
Yeah,
because they won 3 last year. If they have 9 wins, make the playoffs, and Justin Fields is really very much a factor in the media landscape every week where we're watching a highlight. Do you remember when Lamar won the MVP? Every single week there was that play. Like if we have that with Justin Fields and the Bears win 9 games, like that might be enough for Eberflus to win it. There's so many guys that have those built-in narratives already where a couple things go right and shit, the guy's 2-1.
Okay. Well, you know what?
And Patrick has a point. Why are we talking about this in August? The last 4 weeks of the season, all that matters.
It's very, very, very fair. Well, hopefully maybe the Steelers can get the 2 or the 3 seed then. And they're going to lose in the wild card round anyway, so I don't really care what seed they get. And it doesn't really, maybe that actually is even better for the Jags. If the wild card winner is a team like the Dolphins or some other wild card team that's kind of on fumes, and they come to Jacksonville because they reseed in the playoffs. Yeah. So if the 7 seed wins, they go to Jacksonville if they're the one. Yeah,
you play the lowest remaining seed after.
Yeah, it's all reseeded. Right? Okay.
Wild card weekend.
Excuse me. All right, good pods. Let's call it. Good job on the AFC.
These were fun.
Yeah, these were, and we'll be back next week for the NFC West. I know you guys have all been eagerly anticipating. What are we going to say about the most exciting division in sports? Well, you're going to find out next week as we put a bow on the NFL previews.
I'm kind of pumped for those.
We're getting close, man. It's almost regular season time. I'm seeing real deal college football bets in the accounts. Like we're getting close, man.
Yeah, we got week 0. We got one more week of preseason.